Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the dust and chill of a stone-floored medieval cottage where the wind whispers through the cracks in the walls and a pot of thin pottage simmers quietly over the hearth. You're not royalty, not a noblewoman with silks and herbs and attendants. You're just you. A woman in the 14th century. And it's that time of the month. Your shift, coarse woolen already stained and patched, scratches at your skin as you stir. You feel the familiar ache in your back, a heaviness low in your belly, and you already know today's going to be a hard one. There's no ibuprofen waiting on the table, no heating pad tucked under your mattress, no one bringing you tea and sympathy. It's just you, your chores, and your blood. And you probably won't survive this century, let alone this decade. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far or late, post your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise before dawn because everyone does, even when you're bleeding, even when you can barely sit straight from the cramps. Outside, the cockerel's just beginning to crow, and your muscles are already tight from yesterday's work. You're not allowed the indulgence of rest. Your life is labor, plain and simple. You tend to the animals, you grind the barley, you fetch water, you bake, and the blood keeps coming. There's no bathroom, of course. Just a bucket maybe, or a pit outside if you're lucky. And no privacy. Your family sleeps in one room, sometimes all in the same bed. You don't talk about what's happening to your body. You can't. It isn't shameful exactly, it's just unspeakable. A woman's bleeding time is a thing best ignored, concealed, endured in silence. You reach under your shift, gingerly, already feeling the dampness. There are no pads, no tampons, no cups. What you have, if you're lucky, is a rag. A small square of linen, maybe wool if it's winter. If you've torn an old chemise into strips, that'll do. You fold it between your legs and hope it stays. Some women tie it in place with cord or make dew belts, but even that's a luxury. And then you start your day. Outside, the village smells like damp straw smoke and old animals. You carry a pail to the well, trying not to shift your hips too much. Walking jars your body, and every step stirs the cramping again. Sometimes the cloth slips. You feel it. You try not to let anyone notice. You're not supposed to enter the church while bleeding. That's the rule. They say you're unclean ritually, spiritually, physically. You're not fit for holy space. Some priests might not even let you kneel at the altar if they suspect. You don't talk about it, but you know. Everyone knows. So on Sundays, you sometimes hang back. You sit near the door. You say your prayers, but don't take communion. Just in case. At home, your mother might have given you a few herbs if she knew them. Rue, perhaps, or mugwort, or yarrow. Nothing pleasant. Maybe a bitter tea brewed over the hearth with the hope it might soothe the pain or stem the bleeding. Some women chew parsley. Some bind hot stones in cloth and place them on their bellies. But often it's nothing, just quiet endurance. The bleeding might last a few days, or a week. It varies. Sometimes it doesn't stop. And that's terrifying because blood is life, and you know deeply bodily know that too much loss could kill you. You've heard stories of women who bled and never rose again. They didn't have names for conditions like endometriosis or fibroids or clotting disorders. They just said the womb was cursed or hot or overworked. You've heard of the wandering womb, haven't you? A belief that your womb, restless and dissatisfied, could roam your body if it wasn't anchored by pregnancy. That it could rise into your chest and strangle you with hysteria. That's the word they used, hysteria. A madness of women caused by blood and bile and the moon. And so you are expected to be silent and functional. To keep moving, keep tending, keep spinning and mending, bleeding quietly all the while. Your husband might not care. He might not notice. Or he might blame your temperament too much. Blood makes you sharp-tongued, witchy, erratic. At least that's what the physician's texts say. Not that you'll read them. Books are for monks and clerics. For you, knowledge is passed from woman to woman, whispered beside the fire between births and burials. When your period ends, there's no celebration, just relief. Your cloths are boiled if there's fuel or beaten clean in the river, hung secretly in the back where no one will ask. They don't smell good. They never really come clean. But they're all you have. And you'll use them again next month and the month after until you're pregnant or dead. Sometimes you wonder, is this what your life will be? A cycle of bleeding, working, birthing, mourning. And yes, it is. That's what it's like to be a woman in your village in this century, in this body. There's no escape. Only the brief windows between flow and labor. And even those are haunted by the dread of what's to come next. So you wrap your arms around yourself in the dim light of morning and keep going. You pack away the bloodied cloths in a bundle of old linen and tuck them under the cot. You lift the water pail. The baby's crying now. You can smell onions burning in the pot. You can hear the pigs knocking over their trough. Life doesn't wait even for blood. And as you step outside into the muddy yard again, the mist curling around your ankles, your back aching, and your womb still sore, you think. Not for the first time that you wish you'd been born a man. But only briefly. Because even if they don't bleed, they die in wars, or from infected wounds, or from the lash. No one escapes hardship here. But yours is a pain that never gets named. You're 13 the first time it happens, and it arrives like a curse. You remember it clearly, don't you? The sharp pain that woke you early, so early, the fire hadn't yet been stirred to life, and the sudden sticky wetness between your legs. You thought you'd injured yourself. You were afraid, confused. When you reached down and saw the blood on your fingertips, you didn't know whether to cry or to scream. But you didn't do either. You crept to the doorway of the bed where your mother lay snoring, and you whispered her name. Not too loud. You didn't want to wake your brothers. She sat up immediately. She knew. Her face didn't change, not much. No fear, no alarm. Just a tired sort of acceptance. She pulled you outside into the gray dawn light and handed you a cloth. No explanations, no blessings, no talk of womanhood. Just the rag and a low whispered command to wash yourself at the stream. So you did. You walked barefoot down the muddy path with your hands clutched between your legs, afraid the blood would drip through your shift. The water was freezing that morning, the cold so sharp it stole the breath from your lungs. You squatted behind the reeds, scrubbing awkwardly, wondering what you had done to deserve this. And when you returned, your mother gave you porridge and handed you your chores as if nothing had changed. But everything had. From that day on, you were different. You had become something else in their eyes, less child, more womb. You could be married now. You could be pregnant. and everyone around you knew it. That first year was the worst. The cycles were irregular. Sometimes you bled for a day, sometimes for 10. Sometimes it was light, and other times it soaked through the cloth so quickly you couldn't keep up. You started carrying an extra rag tucked into your apron just in case. You learned how to fold them tighter, how to retie the cord when it loosened, how to walk without chafing. No one offered you much advice. Not really. The older women just nodded when you mentioned it. They'd been through it all themselves. They had lived it, survived it. What else was there to say? You listened more than you spoke. That's how you learned. You heard that some women used moss, soft absorbent packed into their shifts when cloth was scarce. Others used straw, though that always sounded painful. You heard whispers of women who used beeswax-soaked linen, believing it might block conception. And even a girl once, Anna, from the next village over, who bled so heavily she was taken to the priest who tried to exorcise her womb. That story stayed with you. The idea that something inside you could be so out of your control that it frightened people. That a natural part of being alive could be mistaken for evil. But you didn't say that out loud. You just kept your eyes down and your rags clean. By your second year, the pain became more familiar. You knew when it was coming. You could feel it in your bones, in the way your stomach twisted, the way your breasts ached, the way your mood turned sharp and brittle. But naming it didn't help. There were no words for it, really. Only the ones men used: complaints about foul humors, imbalances of the blood, dangerous wombs leaking toxins. And still, the work didn't stop. Even on the worst days when the cramps bent you double and the bleeding came so fast you feared it would soak through your skirts, in church you worked. You baked. You stitched. You helped slaughter the chickens. You pressed herbs for drying and turned the wheel at the mill. You remember one spring, the rain was late that year, and everything bloomed at once when your bleeding came just as the fields needed tending. Your father didn't look at you when you said you were unwell. He just grunted and motioned for the yoke. You pulled it over your shoulders and bent into the work blood leaking between your legs, with every step hot and humiliating. By midday, you were dizzy. By sunset, you were staggering. No one asked if you were all right, and you didn't expect them to. But later by the fire, your mother pressed a hand to your forehead and handed you a drink, something bitter, dark, in a wooden cup. You didn't ask what it was. You just drank, and the pain dulled slightly. Not gone, just softened like a shadow behind a veil. And still the days passed, and the blood returned, and you learned to live with it. Over time, you discovered your own rituals. You learned to sleep on your side with one leg bent to reduce the ache. You learned to keep a flat stone near the hearth, to warm and rest on your belly. You stopped fearing the sight of blood in the morning light. It became part of the rhythm of your life. You began to understand that this was your tether to time. You could track the moons by it. You could count the weeks. You could feel the shift in your body, like the shift in seasons. Bleeding meant you weren't pregnant. That was good sometimes, other times not. It all depended on the year, the man, the hunger in the house. One year you didn't bleed at all, for 4 months. You thought maybe finally you were dying. Your body felt strange, thick, and uncertain. But then it returned heavier than ever. You lay in bed for 2 days, unable to move, sure the pain would kill you. But it didn't. It never does. At least not yet. You sometimes think of the women who don't come back from their monthly curse, the ones who bleed and never stop, who faint in the fields or die in childbed with red sheets beneath them. And you wonder how many of those deaths start with the same ache you feel now. How many were just like you, trying to keep the fire going, while their body unraveled inside. No one speaks their names. But you remember them. Because every time your belly cramps and your legs go weak, and you feel the blood soaking the cloth again, you think of them, of what your body might be hiding, of how thin the line is between life and death, when all you have is a strip of linen and the hope it holds. And so you keep moving. You rise with the dawn. You pull the comb through your hair. You rinse the cloth again and hang it by the hearth. You wash the blood from your thighs with cold water. You straighten your back, wince, and step outside. Because this is your life, and it won't pause just because you're bleeding. It's strange how quickly your body becomes a quiet battleground. Not the kind you cry about. The kind you endure in silence, gritting your teeth behind a smile, holding your breath when the cramps bite hard. No one sees the effort it takes to stay upright when your belly feels like it's trying to twist itself inside out. You've learned to mask the pain beneath layers of chores, small talk, and obedience. You know when it's coming now. Long before the bleeding starts, your skin tightens, your mood darkens. Your breasts grow tender, and your patience thins like stretched thread. Some months you cry for no reason, snapping at your siblings, then apologizing the next breath. The women call it the turning. They nod knowingly when you grow sullen, but they still hand you the broom. There's a superstition in the village, one you overheard when you were little and only understood later. They say a bleeding woman can sour milk with a glance, that her touch wilts herbs, that bread won't rise in her hands. No one says it directly to your face, of course. But when you reach for the sourdough starter, someone always offers to do it instead. And when the sheep miscarried last spring, the old widow looked straight at you. You knew what she was thinking. Bleeding makes you other. Not cursed exactly, just unstable, mysterious, powerful in a way no one dares name. Some call it sacred, but not in the way you'd hope. Not reverence, just fear. That fear keeps you separate. Even in the warmth of the cottage, you feel a quiet distance. There are days your mother's voice softens when she looks at you during your time. She knows. She went through it too. But even she can't make space for your discomfort. Her hands are too full of labor. Her time for pain is long past. She just tells you to keep your legs warm and not to lift anything heavier than a kettle. It's a kind of care, but also a kind of dismissal, and still the bleeding comes. You notice the stains never quite wash out of the cloth anymore. They fade, turn brown, but never vanish. You've taken to sewing little colored patches onto the corners, partly for modesty, partly to mark the cleaner sides. The bundle of rags under your cot is heavier now. You wish for something better, something softer or easier to use, but cloth is precious. Linen doesn't grow on trees. Every scrap must stretch its use far beyond what feels comfortable. Sometimes you lie awake at night worrying you'll bleed through your shift. It's happened before. You woke to cold dampness on your thighs and a sticky trail drying down your leg. It wasn't shame that hit you, but exhaustion. The idea of waking, changing, washing again before the sun even rose. And all of it in secret in the dark without so much as a whisper of comfort from the world. You've gotten clever, though. You learned to place moss inside the cloth to soak up more. You even tried layering 2 rags once, though it rubbed your skin raw after a few hours. but you said nothing. You walked through the market, face pale blood seeping in spite of your effort, and no one knew. You passed the midwife that day, her basket filled with bundled herbs and dried roots. She glanced at you once, just once, and you swear she knew. Her eyes paused on your face just for a moment, and then she walked on. She didn't speak, didn't stop, didn't offer anything. But you remember her gaze. It stayed with you longer than the pain. There's a book locked in the priest's chest at the church, so you've heard. Written in Latin filled with the knowledge of men. It claims that menstrual blood is dangerous, that it can corrupt wine, cause leprosy, drive dogs mad. You don't read, but others do. And when they whisper these things, you believe them a little. How could you not? Your body has taught you to expect punishment. But there are other stories, too. Older ones. Tales your grandmother used to mutter under her breath when the moon was full and the fire low. Stories of women who bled in time with the earth, who danced barefoot in the frost, marked with red, untouched by men, feared by kings. Those women had names once before the church buried them, before the world taught you to hate your own cycle. You want to believe those stories. But it's hard when your days are filled with boiling rags and secrecy and trying to scrub bloodstains from straw-filled bedding. When the cramps grow sharp enough to steal your breath mid-conversation and you pretend nothing's wrong. Even the animals know. The cat curls tighter around your feet during your time as if she senses your vulnerability. The cow eyes you warily when you walk past, ears flicking as though you carry something unnatural. You do, don't you, a tide that rises without your control. A clock that ticks through pain instead of time. A reminder that you are not just a servant or a daughter or a wife, but something ancient and unknowable. The bleeding reminds you that your body does not belong to you fully. Not in this world. It belongs to labor, to children, to the church's idea of sin. It belongs to your husband if you have one, to the midwife when the baby comes, but not to you. So you bleed and you work and you swallow the pain like it's just another chore. Some nights when the blood is heavy and your head is thick with fatigue, you stare at the dark rafters above your bed and imagine a world where the bleeding would be met with warmth, with soft linens and rest, with hot drinks and kind voices, with space. But that world is not here. Here you have moss, you have the river, you have the ache in your belly and the knowledge that it will come again in 20-some days, whether you're ready or not. You don't curse it anymore, not out loud, but sometimes in your heart you long for the bleeding to end. Not because it hurts, though it does, but because it never asks your permission. It just takes, and takes, and takes. Still you rise with the dawn. Still you change the cloth. Still you press your palm to your side and count your breaths until the pain passes. Because what choice do you have? You are a woman in the Middle Ages, and your blood does not wait for sympathy. You wake up with the ache already pulsing in your back. You know it before you move, before you even open your eyes. Your body has a way of warning you, an inner tug like the tide pulling beneath the surface. And sure enough, as you shift slightly on the straw mattress, you feel the warmth between your thighs, the damp. You've bled through again. The cloth must have shifted in the night, or maybe it just wasn't enough. You lie still for a moment, staring at the rough beams above your head, listening to the soft breaths of your brothers nearby. Your mother is already stirring at the hearth, the sound of kindling snapping as she tries to coax flame from damp wood. You don't want to move, but you have to. You rise carefully, gripping your shift to keep it from dragging across your skin. The blood has dried slightly against your thighs, tacky and unpleasant. You pull your cloak around you and step outside quietly, making your way down the familiar path to the stream. The dew has settled thick on the grass. Your feet are cold by the time you reach the bank, but the cold is nothing new. You squat by the edge, tugging up your hem, and dip a cloth into the water. It turns pink, then red. You scrub your legs, your hands your shift where the stain bled through. The blood is always harder to wash when it's dried. You've learned to act quickly. You rinse the cloth, wring it out, and fold it again. It's not fully clean, but it's clean enough. Everything in your life is like that, clean enough, warm enough, bearable enough. By the time you return to the cottage, the day has already begun. There's dough rising in the wooden trough. Your sister is grinding barley with a heavy stone. The youngest is picking lice from his tunic. You slide into your place, acting like nothing's wrong. No one asks. They never do. Later that day, as you help with the wash, the midwife walks past your yard. She doesn't stop, but you hear her humming under her breath, an old song you remember from when you were smaller, something about the moon and milk and a woman's sorrow. You don't know all the words, but you hum it too sometimes under your breath when the pain is too much and you can't cry without being heard. You've noticed the patterns. Your cycle doesn't just affect your body, it shifts your place in the rhythm of everything. The animals seem jumpier when you're bleeding. The fire won't catch as easily. Bread takes longer to rise. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's all the warnings folded into your upbringing coming true before your eyes. You know better than to speak it aloud. Superstition is both law and language here. Even hinting at strange powers, especially for a woman, is dangerous. You remember Maris. She was older than you by several years, quiet, kept to herself. No husband, no children. She bled heavily, everyone said so. Missed church often. Kept herbs in little waxed bundles, dried mugwort and sage, little charms made of knotted thread. Then one spring, the miller's child fell sick. He said a shadow passed over the crib before the fever began. A dark shape, a woman's shape. They came for Maris the next morning. You still remember her scream. She wasn't burned. They weren't doing that in your village, but she was sent away, banished to the woods beyond the outer fields, and no one spoke her name again. Her cottage fell in on itself within a year. You still walk a little faster when you pass its remains, and when you bleed too much more than you should, you think of her, and you worry. Not because you believe she was a witch, but because you know how little it takes to be treated like one. Your mother tells you to keep your head down, to keep your clothes hidden, to smile and nod, and never let the priest think you know anything beyond what he tells you. So you do. You bleed quietly as though it's a sin to be noticed, but inside you simmer. You know that if you were born a man, no one would whisper about you. No one would fear your touch. Your blood would be a badge proof of your strength, your worth in battle. But as a woman, your blood is both your burden and your threat. It isolates you, and yet it connects you too. There's something unspoken among the women, a silent acknowledgement. When you pass another girl in the village and she presses a hand to her lower back, you recognize the gesture. When you see rags soaking in a bucket near the fire, you look away out of respect. When you're both hauling water and one of you winces mid-step, the other knows why. There's no praise in it, no glory. But there is solidarity. Sometimes the older women gather herbs together near the edge of the woods. You're never quite sure what all of them are for. Some are for childbirth, others for stomach cramps. A few like pennyroyal and tansy you suspect are meant for more than just pain. You never ask directly. You just watch. Learn. Store the knowledge somewhere quiet, somewhere no one else can see. It might save your life one day. You wish there were more stories. Ones where bleeding meant something more than pain, more than risk. Something powerful. But the stories have been swallowed by the years, scrubbed out by prayers and sermons and the rules written by men. Still, you carry the ache in your belly and the rags at your hip and the knowledge passed from hand to hand in the dark. That is your inheritance, and it is enough. So you press the cloth in place again and tie it snug. You breathe in through your nose and try not to flinch at the familiar cramping. You wipe your hands on your apron and go back to work. Because dinner won't cook itself. Because your siblings are hungry. Because no one cares if you're bleeding. And because this is what it means to be you, not weak, not cursed, not shameful. Just a woman, and the moon is full again. By the time you're 16, you've bled enough to lose count of the months. Your body is no longer a mystery, but it's still not your own. Every part of it is catalogued by others. Your hips, your hands, the way your breasts fill out your shift. You can feel the scrutiny. The village is small, and there are always eyes. Eyes that watch the way you walk to the stream. Eyes that measure how much water you carry. Eyes that see you wince when the cramping begins again. The bleeding has changed you, hardened you in places no one sees. You've become used to layering your cloths just right, knowing exactly how to fold and tie to avoid stains. You've figured out how to discreetly dry them behind the hearth, steaming quietly, while everyone's distracted with the pot, or the bread, or the mending. You know how to tuck yourself into corners when the ache flares too strongly, pretending to scrub or sweep while you breathe through it. No one ever taught you these things. They're not part of any lesson. But all the women know. You can see it in the way they move when it's their turn. The way their shoulders curve a little more inward. The way they avoid sitting on the wooden bench too suddenly. The way their gaze shifts lower, softer. You've learned to watch for that. The pain is part of the rhythm now. Sometimes dull, sometimes sharp, always present. You've tried herbs. You've boiled mugwort and sipped it through gritted teeth. You've placed warm stones on your belly. You've whispered prayers not to the saints, but to something older, to the sky, to the earth, to the moon when it hangs full and low. The midwife once caught you doing it. She didn't scold you, just raised a brow as if to say you'll learn your own ways soon enough. And you have. You've learned that some days the bleeding is merciful, a trickle, a dull ache easily managed. And other days it's a flood, a punishing tide that makes you dizzy, hollow, brittle at the edges. On those days you walk slower, talk less, keep your eyes down, and still the world expects the same from you. The labor never stops. Your mother gives you no extra rest just because your womb's shedding itself. You churn butter while your legs cramp. You haul wood with trembling arms. You pluck feathers from slaughtered birds while your cloth is already soaked and has to be changed for the third time that day. You carry your body like it's a basket filled with stones, too heavy, too awkward, but you do not drop it. You carry it anyway. Once in the heat of summer, you bled so much you nearly fainted while turning the spit. You sat down hard, the world spinning. Everyone thought it was the heat. You didn't correct them. You let them fan your face and bring you water and chalk it up to sun. Because if they knew the truth, they'd only roll their eyes and mutter about delicate women, as though bleeding weren't already proof of your strength. You wonder sometimes what it's like for the girls in the manor house. You saw one once riding past on a fine white mare, her gown clean, and trailing her face, powdered eyes shaded by a veil. She didn't look like she had to change her own cloths. She didn't look like she'd ever bent over a stream, scrubbing the blood from linen with shaking fingers. But she bled too. You know it. She's not spared the cycle. No one is. Maybe she has servants. Maybe she lies in bed when the cramps come, sipping something sweet from a silver cup, while other women boil her water and fetch her dried petals to steep. Or maybe she just hides it better, more practice, better tools, more layers to disguise the discomfort. Or maybe she suffers just like you behind the silk and smiles. You'll never know. Her world is sealed to you. But the blood is universal. It doesn't care about borders or status or marriage. It comes when it wants, takes what it wants, and leaves you hollow and aching. The priest says it's Eve's punishment, that your pain is the cost of sin. You sat through the sermon swallowing your frustration, hands folded, legs clenched tight around your makeshift pad. You didn't raise your voice. You never do. But part of you burned inside because you didn't eat the fruit. You didn't ask to bleed. You didn't choose this body, this life, this endless cycle of giving and suffering. And yet, here you are. The worst part some months is the unpredictability. There's no calendar, no red ink markings to track your flow. Just the feel of your belly, the sting in your lower back, the tension that builds behind your knees. You try to count the days. You scratch marks into the underside of a stool leg when no one's looking. But still, it catches you off guard. At church, in the woods, at the market. Once in the middle of preparing a rabbit for stew, you felt it come hot and sudden. You excused yourself, went to the edge of the trees, and stuffed moss hastily into your shift. It worked barely. You returned, hands shaking, heart pounding, and no one said a word. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they chose not to. That kind of silence is its own kind of mercy. You remember when your little sister bled for the first time. She came to you crying, terrified. You gave her a cloth and stroked her hair and told her it would pass. And then you showed her quietly, carefully, how to fold the rag, how to tie the belt, how to sit in a way that wouldn't chafe. And you told her gently to keep it secret. Not because it's wrong, but because it's hers. And there are few things in this life a woman can truly claim. Now, as you rise from your morning chores and feel the cloth shift against your skin, still damp, still warm, you wonder how many more years you'll do this. How many moons will pass? How many rags will be washed and rewashed and boiled and dried? You're not old yet. But the world moves quickly, and one day the bleeding will stop. They say it's a strange kind of freedom when it does, but also a danger. Women who no longer bleed are feared again like the old crones who live on the edge of the village. They say too much freedom is dangerous in a woman. For now you bleed. For now you labor. For now you endure. And when the blood comes, you meet it not with fear anymore, but with tired eyes and practiced hands. Because it always comes, and you are always ready. There's a smell to it always, faint but unmistakable, iron and earth and something animal beneath it all. You've gotten used to it. It clings to your rags, to your thighs, to your sleeping straw when the cloth shifts in the night. Sometimes you wonder if others can smell it too, if they're just too polite or too wary to say so. You've stopped worrying about it as much. You've had to. You can't afford to be delicate. Your hands are already blistered from soapwort and cold water from wringing out linens by the stream. Your fingernails hold traces of everything: dirt from the fields, soot from the hearth, blood from game. What's one more scent in a life where nothing is ever truly clean? Still, the fear of being noticed never fully leaves you. You're always a little more careful when it's your time. You press your legs closer together when you sit. You hunch slightly when walking. You excuse yourself more often to check your cloths folded and wedged as best you can. You've learned which herbs to chew to ease the cramps when you can get them. You've learned how to read your own body, the way others read weather, the pressure, the signals, the sudden shift in mood. And always you move. Your life doesn't pause for bleeding. There's always firewood to gather a child, to rock chickens to chase back into the yard. You mend your brother's tunics with hands that tremble from the ache low in your spine. You stir the pottage and barely taste it. The world keeps pressing forward even as your insides unravel once again. There's a strange power in that kind of pain. No one calls it power, of course. Not here. But you've come to understand it for what it is, a relentless rhythmic reminder that you survive something each and every month. Not grandly, not loudly, but steadily. You once heard a story told by a traveler who passed through the village of a land far away where women are honored during their bleeding, given red tents to rest in surrounded by song and solitude. You don't know if the story is true. You doubt it. Most of those tales are only half-truths embroidered and polished for effect, but still the image stayed with you. A red tent, a warm place, soft voices instead of silence. You imagine what it would be like to be given space instead of suspicion, to have your bleeding met with comfort instead of constraint. What would it feel like to lie back without shame, to rest without guilt, to be seen not as a burden, but as a living miracle? That's not the world you live in. Here you learn to hide the blood and keep your voice quiet. You learn to balance shame and necessity. And then there are the times the bleeding doesn't come. It happens suddenly. A skipped moon, then another. You know what it means. The way your belly feels tighter, the way your chest aches differently, the slow change in your body's rhythm. It's not sickness. It's something else. Something everyone around you has been waiting for. Pregnancy. There's no test, no official sign. Just silence. And dread. Or relief, or both all tangled. The first time it happened to you, you felt the world tilt slightly. You didn't want to believe it. You kept waiting for the bleeding to return, holding your breath each morning. But it never did. Instead came the nausea, the heaviness, the exhaustion that bled into your bones like winter cold. And everyone around you noticed before you said a word. Because when the bleeding stops, the questions begin. Is it your husband's? If you have one, the answer is simple. If not, the answer is dangerous. A woman who bleeds is considered clean only in her silence. But a woman who does not, who skips her cycle, becomes a spectacle. People whisper. They count backward. They guess. And if the math doesn't add up, if there's no ring on your finger or blessing from the priest, then your stopped cycle becomes an accusation. You've seen it happen. Girls sent away to distant cousins, or locked in their family homes until the baby comes. Or worse, taken into the forest by midwives who don't ask questions and return with empty hands. So when your cycle returns after those missed moons, it brings with it a bittersweet flood. You feel hollowed by the bleeding, yes, but you also feel safe again. The risk has passed, the whispers quiet, and you can return to the rhythm. You know, the one that punishes you, yes, but at least keeps you inside the fold, until it stops for good. There comes a time, you're told, when the bleeding ceases forever, when the body crosses a threshold and the moon no longer speaks through your womb. For some women, it's a relief. For others, a mourning. They say it comes with hot flashes and strange moods. They say it dries you out from the inside, makes your bones brittle, your spirit restless. You haven't reached that point yet. But you've seen it in the older women. The way they move slower. The way they no longer care to smile through discomfort. The way they hold their own pain like a badge. The world treats them differently. Not as mothers, not as maidens. Just women past their use. You've heard people call them useless. Hags. You've seen them ignored at gatherings, pushed to the corners like furniture. But you've also seen how they speak more freely, how they lift their chins higher, how they sit without apologizing for the space they take up. Maybe that's its own kind of freedom. Still, for now, the blood remains, and each month when it comes, you greet it with a tired sigh, a practiced hand, and that quiet, familiar ache that no one else seems to notice. You do what you've always done, fold the cloth, tie it in place, and continue with your day. Because that's what women like you do. You endure the tide. You carry the weight. You walk through the world, pretending not to hurt. But inside, you know. This is strength. Not the kind sung about by bards or carved into stone, but the quiet kind. The steady kind. The kind passed from mother to daughter wordlessly, endlessly through time. You're 20 now, and the rhythm of your life beats with the quiet cadence of blood and labor. There's something comforting in the predictability of it, even if it hurts, even if it stains. You know what to expect. You've learned your cycle like a secret prayer, quiet, repetitive, known by heart. It comes as no surprise anymore when the dull ache settles into your lower back. When your belly turns heavy like stones have been sewn into your womb, you feel it coming before it does. You've memorized the signs, the irritability, the thick fog in your mind, the slight swelling in your fingers. You prepare without being told. You're careful now. Not because you're ashamed, but because you have to be. You know how quickly a misstep becomes gossip. A stain on your skirts. A slip in your mood. A missed service at church. It's enough to get the whispers going. And you've learned that the most dangerous thing a woman can do here is draw attention. So you don't. You move quietly through your bleeding days. You keep extra cloth tucked beneath your mattress, softened by years of use. You know exactly how to sit to avoid shifting it too much. You boil your rags at night when the house is quiet, letting the steam rise without explanation. It's not that you're afraid. Not anymore. It's just easier this way. You once thought about asking the midwife for something stronger, something to stop the bleeding just for a little while. You'd heard whispers of certain herbs, pennyroyal, juniper, tansy, but even the mention of them felt like an invocation, and the risk was too great. The wrong brew, the wrong measure, and the pain could worsen, or the bleeding might not stop at all. You've seen women take that chance, and you've seen what happens when it fails. There's something about the blood that makes men nervous. Not just the priests and the healers, but the husbands, the fathers, the brothers. They don't understand it, and they don't want to. They talk around it, treat it like a nuisance or a defect. Something to be hidden, managed, kept beneath layers of linen and silence. You've watched your own husband flinch when you mentioned your time once, just once, early in your marriage. You were trying to explain why you couldn't join him in bed that night. His face turned pale. His hand fell away. He said nothing. Just rolled over and slept with his back to you. You never mentioned it again. Instead, you learned to time your distance without words. You feigned fatigue or a headache, or pretended to have extra chores. Anything but the truth. Because the truth makes them uncomfortable. And when men are uncomfortable, women suffer. So you carry the truth alone. Your rags have become almost like talismans, folded with precision, cared for with tenderness. You patch them when they fray. You know the feel of each one. Some are better for the first heavy day. Others thinner and easier to conceal. You've even stitched a small pouch to keep one tucked discreetly in your apron when you're away from home. You learned that trick from an older woman in the village. She never spoke directly of the blood, but she handed you the little linen square one day, without a word, eyes crinkled in the corners with understanding. That was enough. It's always been this way. Woman to woman. Gesture to gesture. No need for names. You remember, too, the strange advice people give about easing the pain. Lie flat on your back. Walk it off. Boil rue leaves and drink the water. Place a clove of garlic under your tongue. Some of it helps. Most of it doesn't. But you try everything once, just in case. The hardest days are the ones when it comes early. You wake to a mess, your shift soaked your thighs, sticky with blood that's already gone cold. You feel the shame rise up instinctively, even though you know better, even though there's no sin in it. You scrub yourself furiously at the basin, teeth clenched, hands trembling. You try not to cry. And then you carry on with your day like nothing happened. Because you have no choice. You envy the men their freedom. The way they can leave the house at dawn without packing cloth. The way they ride horses without flinching. The way they sit in church without worrying about stains. The way their bodies don't betray them in such visible, inconvenient, exhausting ways. But envy doesn't change anything. Instead, you take comfort in the quiet bonds between women, the unspoken network of understanding. The way a woman will pass you a scrap of clean cloth without a word. The way someone will distract your husband with idle talk so you can slip away to the woods and change your rag. The way the older women pretend not to notice when the younger ones hunch slightly and move slower. It's a sisterhood built on blood and silence, and it runs deeper than any sermon. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if everyone talked about it. Really talked. Openly. If the men knew. If the priests understood. If the world didn't treat you like a vessel that leaks too often. But you know better. Words are dangerous. Words have teeth. So you stay quiet. You smile when people ask how you're feeling. You nod when your husband kisses your cheek. You knead the bread and tend the garden and feed the chickens. And all the while the ache blooms low and steady in your belly. There's a power in that. Not loud, not visible, but power all the same. And every time the blood comes again, you take it in stride. You wash, you fold, you carry on. Because you've always known that strength isn't about who swings the sword. It's about who survives the bleeding. It's early spring now. The thaw is softening the edges of the village, and the snow that once clung to the thatched roofs has melted into thick, sucking mud. The air still bites in the morning, but it no longer cuts like it did in January. The ground smells of wet bark and new things trying to live again. And as always, just as the earth begins to stir, your own cycle turns over once more. You feel it as you kneel by the cold stream, scrubbing the last of the winter soot from your cloak. That dull ache in your belly, the faint pressure in your spine. A warning. You pause for a moment, bracing yourself on the wet stones, listening to the water rush past, like it has somewhere better to be. You adjust your knees and try to keep your hands busy. It comes that evening while you're pulling bread from the coals. You feel it first, as a warmth too familiar to be mistaken. You finish your task calmly even as your stomach turns. You set the loaf down on the rough board, cover it with a cloth, and excuse yourself. No one asks where you're going. They don't need to. This is the rhythm of your body, and it has no regard for the rhythm of meals or prayers or the turning of seasons. You head to the back corner of the house where your bundle of cloths is hidden beneath the spare wool and the basket of broken tools. You unwrap the bundle with practiced hands. The linens inside are worn but clean, some a little stiff from drying too close to the fire, others soft from use and many washings. You choose the one with the tightest weave. There's comfort in the routine, even as the pain begins to build. You know it will grow stronger before it fades. The cramps always start like a whisper and end like a storm. You prepare as best you can, layering the cloth, adjusting your shift, placing a bit of moss at the corners for extra absorbency. Then you take a moment to breathe, deep and slow. You press your hands into your sides and count to 10. The pain hasn't peaked yet, but it will. Still you carry on. There's stew to stir a cousin's child to watch kindling to fetch. You move through the evening with the blood moving quietly between your legs, soaking into the linen like a secret. You feel a small jolt of pain with every step, like being gently stabbed from the inside. But you smile. You nod. You make small talk. And no one knows. Later you hear two of the younger girls talking near the back door. One of them, Emmeline, barely 12, has just gotten her first blood. She's whispering about it as though it's something shameful. The other girl listens with wide eyes and bites her lip nervously. You remember that feeling, the sudden shift from child to vessel, the panic, the confusion. So when they pass you by, you gently catch Emmeline's wrist. She freezes. You don't say much. You just hand her a folded cloth pressed into her palm without ceremony. She understands. Her eyes soften. She nods. That's all. That's how it's always been. No grand announcements. Just passing knowledge hand to hand. Your own first time seems so far away now. Another life. Another body. You were a girl then. You're not sure what you are now. A wife, perhaps. Maybe one day a mother. For now, you're a bleeding woman in a world that doesn't pause for blood. You've heard rumors that in other towns, women use more than cloth. In one place, a traveling woman claimed that noble ladies used special wool soaked in wine to soothe the pain and block the flow. In another, someone swore they'd seen a tiny carved stick, slender and smooth, meant to be inserted to catch the blood before it ever reached the shift. You don't know if those stories are true. What you know is cloth, moss, pain, and the quiet fortitude of those who came before you. You once found a piece of old cloth buried at the edge of a collapsed foundation near the woods. Torn and faded, but still folded like it had been tucked away with care. A rag just like yours. You held it in your hands, thinking of the woman who once used it. Where is she now? Long gone, surely. But in that moment, you felt her presence, her exhaustion, her strength, her patience. It's strange how something so simple, a square of stained fabric, can hold the memory of centuries. The next day, you bleed heavier. The cloth you chose fills too quickly. You have to excuse yourself 3 times before mid-morning. You wrap the soiled rag in another tolt, hiding it away until you can rinse it properly. You think of the stream again, of how the water always flows away, carrying your blood far from here. You wonder, where does it go? Does it reach the sea? Does it mix with the water drawn into the well? You don't dwell on the thought. There's no time for that kind of wondering. Still, it lingers. Because even though your blood feels like a solitary burden, you know it's part of something larger. The earth bleeds too in its own way. Trees shed, animals birth and bleed. The moon wanes and returns. Everything is cyclical. Everything aches and releases. You are not separate from that. And that knowledge, small as it is, brings a comfort that no priest's sermon ever has. That night, as the cramps grip you tighter, you lie in bed, curled on your side. You breathe slowly, timing each breath with the rise and fall of the pain. You think of all the women in the village, all lying in their own beds, their own cloths tied in place, enduring the same thing. It's a quiet sisterhood, unseen, unpraised, but unbroken. You fall asleep like that muscle's tight blood still flowing. The fire in the hearth burns low, casting faint light on the rough wooden beams above. And in your dreams, you walk through a forest of red leaves, barefoot, the earth soft beneath you, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers and iron. When you wake, it's still there, that steady pulse, the ache that keeps you anchored to your body. But so is your strength, and you rise again. The bleeding doesn't care what season it is. It comes just the same in the heat of summer, when sweat already clings to your body, and the scent of blood feels heavier in the air. It comes in autumn, when the fields are being cleared, and the ground is hardening under your bare feet. And it comes in winter, when the ache in your belly blends with the ache in your joints, and your fingers are too numb to properly wring out your cloth. And now it's here again, in the height of spring, when the birds are nesting, and every plant seems to be in bloom. You're working in the herb garden when it begins. Not the little kitchen plot behind the cottage, but the larger patch outside the midwife's house, where women gather quietly to tend things that the men prefer not to notice. You're crouched in the soil dirt, pressed under your nails, when the familiar tightness tugs at your lower back. It's always the back first. Always. You don't flinch. You finish pulling the weeds, patting the soil down with the flat of your palm. The midwife's granddaughter is working beside you, humming softly. You glance at her 12, maybe 13, old enough to bleed soon if she hasn't already. You wonder if she'll tell anyone when it happens, or if she'll simply find a rag and keep working like the rest of you. By the time you stand up, the blood has already started. You keep a cloth tucked in your apron, now folded, and wrapped in a second layer for modesty. You excuse yourself with a wordless nod, and the midwife waves you off, already knowing. There's a shared understanding here, no questions, no judgment. Just time, space, and quiet acknowledgement. You slip into the back room where a small basin of water waits. It's cool, and you welcome the chill as you clean yourself. The cloth is unfolded, checked for wear, refolded with precision. It's almost a ritual now. A sacred habit passed through muscle memory more than thought. When you return, no one mentions your absence. You pick up where you left off, gently harvesting nettle leaves with gloved fingers. Later that afternoon, you find yourself alone with the midwife. She watches you from her stool near the hearth, her eyes sharp, though her hands tremble with age. She motions for you to sit, and you obey. "You bleed clean," she asks softly. You nod. She nods back and drops a pinch of dried yarrow into a pot of boiling water. "If it ever turns black," she says, "or if it clots too much to pass, come to me. Don't wait. And don't pray it away. A womb can turn sour if it's ignored." You murmur your thanks. She stirs the pot, watching the steam rise. "Your mother didn't always bleed clean," she adds. "Had to rest for days, some moons. Your aunt, too. Runs in the family sometimes. You've heard this in whispers, but never confirmed. The idea that your blood might be different from one month to the next. That it might hold warnings you don't yet understand. You file it away quietly, the way you do with all useful knowledge. That night, the pain is sharp enough to make you bend double. You're alone in the back room, where the bundles of herbs dry in the rafters, and the midwife keeps her iron pot still warm from the fire. You press your hand into your belly and feel it pulse like something alive beneath the skin. There's always a moment, just one, where you question if this is normal. If this time it will pass. If the cramps will settle or deepen into something worse. You've heard of women who bled for days and never recovered. Of others who didn't bleed at all for months, only to find themselves miscarrying what they didn't know they carried. The line between health and danger is too thin to see. You sit on the edge of the wooden stool and try to sip something hot. A tea the midwife left you, chamomile maybe, or something more bitter. You breathe through the pain and hold the cup steady even as your hands shake. Outside it's raining, lightly. The kind of rain that makes everything smell like earth and growing things. You think of the cloth currently soaking in the pot. Stained but salvageable. You'll boil it again tomorrow. Hang it behind the hearth. Fold it carefully and return it to the bundle. Again and again and again. You wonder how many times you've done this. How many more times you'll have to. The midwife once told you a story about a woman who never bled again after seeing a wolf. Something about shock or magic, or perhaps just a tale to explain the unexplainable. You don't believe it, not really. But there's a part of you tired and sore and longing for stillness that envies the woman in the story. No more cloths. No more pain. No more hiding. But then you think of the old women in the village, their stillness, yes, but also their silence, their detachment. as if once the bleeding stops, some door inside them closes for good. You're not ready for that yet. You still have too many years ahead, too many moons to track, too many moments when your body reminds you who you are and what you've inherited. You return to your cot that night with a hot stone wrapped in cloth cradled against your belly. The cramps ease slowly, though not completely. They rarely do, but you sleep anyway. Tired, cramping, bleeding, alive. Because the truth is, this is living too. The pain, the blood, the endless cycles. This is your body's way of marking time, of reminding you that you are still here, still working, still part of the rhythm of the world. Even if no one ever thanks you for it. Even if the world forgets that this too is a kind of strength. You start to mark the moon without meaning to. You've never had a calendar, of course. No parchment or quill, no ink to waste on tallying time. But the moon gives you enough. Each time it returns full and glowing, you take note by instinct now, not intention. You've begun to know your body's rhythm, the way you know when rain is coming, or when the cows are ready to calve. It's just there, folded into the fabric of your living. The pain has settled into a pattern, too. First the swelling, then the tightness low in your belly. The strange heaviness in your legs. The way your patience frays even when you try to hold it steady. You say things sharper than you mean to. You press harder on the dough when kneading. You cry at things you would have ignored just the week before. And then the bleeding comes, a slow warmth, a sigh from inside you, sometimes a flood. It's just past dusk when it arrives this time. You're bending over a pile of laundry, wringing a tunic that's heavier than it should be when the first cramp ripples across your belly like a rope pulled too tight. You pause, hands still wet, and breathe. You know this feeling. You set the tunic aside, reach into your apron, and slip the folded cloth from its hiding place. You don't need to be told what to do. You walk to the back to the small lean-to where rags and soapwort and water wait. The evening chill seeps through the gaps in the wall, but you're used to that too. You clean yourself, replace the cloth, and say nothing when you return to the others. They don't ask. They never do. You've come to understand the silence is not always cruelty. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's a kindness, even. The women around you know better than to draw attention. There's power in moving quietly, in tending to your pain without spectacle. You're not invisible, just wise enough not to make noise about things that men fear and the church calls impure. It used to bother you, this silence. It felt like abandonment once. But now it feels like solidarity. Because you notice it in the smallest of ways. The way an older woman might offer you her stool when you're cramping, even though she doesn't say why. The way your sister pulls your heavier chores without a word when your time has come. The way the midwife leaves a sprig of peppermint near your bedding the morning she knows it's begun again. They see you. They know. They remember. This time the pain lasts longer. By the second day, your knees are weak. You walk slowly, one hand pressed to your side as if it might keep the aching contained. You try to sit near the fire more often, using the heat to soothe your lower belly. It helps a little. Enough to keep going. Enough to move through your tasks without drawing too much notice. It's always about doing just enough. You wash the rags at night now when everyone else has gone to sleep. You slip outside in the dark to the basin where moonlight catches on the ripples and scrub until the water turns pink and then clear again. You hang the cloths near the hearth afterward, angled so the smoke from the fire will help disguise the scent. You still worry someone will see the stains. You still worry someone will say something, but they never do. By now you know there are names for women who bleed too much, or too loudly, or too publicly. They call them unclean, or worse. You remember once a year or more ago a woman who came through the village with blood staining the hem of her dress. Not much, just a shadow. But the butcher's wife saw it, and that was enough. Whispers started. Someone said she cursed the bread. Another said she brought fever. She didn't stay long. You don't know where she went, but you've never forgotten the way she walked head high, eyes steady as though she didn't care what they thought, as though she had long since learned that the blood was not her shame but their fear. You've wondered since then if you might ever walk like that. Not now. Maybe not here. But someday. For now you're careful. You always are. The priest gives his sermon the next morning, something about purity and obedience. You sit in the back, your legs tucked tightly together, the rag beneath you thick and freshly rinsed. You feel the warmth of it even through your shift. You feel your pony pressing forward steady and rhythmic, even as the priest calls the bleeding a mark of Eve's sin. You don't believe him. Not fully. Not anymore. Because you've seen too much to think it's a curse. You've seen strength bloom in the women who bleed and then rise and still feed children and stir stew and scrub walls and carry water. You've seen what it takes to survive the ache and the shame and the secrecy. You've seen your own reflection, pale and sweating, bent over the basin, whispering prayers to no God you could name, and still tying your cloth tight and moving on. That is not weakness. That is not sin. That is power dressed in silence. After the sermon, you walk home slowly, careful with each step. The bleeding is heavier than usual, and you can feel the dampness spreading. You hold your cloak closer around your waist and take the longer path past the stream through the trees so you can stop without being seen. You press yourself against the trunk of an old beech and breathe shallow and quiet, waiting for the pain to ease. The bark is rough behind your back. The birds are singing overhead. Life goes on. And so do you. You don't cry. You don't complain. You don't curse the blood anymore. You just wait until the wave passes. Then you lift your chin, step forward, and walk the rest of the way home. Because that's what you've always done. And because deep down you know you are stronger than this pain. You've proven it every month. You'll prove it again. It always seems to happen when you least need it. This time it's on the morning of the spring fair, when the village is buzzing with the kind of excitement that only comes a few times a year. Banners have been strung between cottages, rough but colorful. The air is full of roasting meat, spiced cider, the sound of fiddles warming up for dancing later. Everyone's out faces, scrubbed hands, busy. You're expected to help at the bread stall, standing on your feet for hours. And of course, that's when the bleeding begins. You know the feeling at once, a tug, deep inside, a strange hollowness in your stomach, and then within minutes, the spreading warmth between your thighs. You close your eyes for a moment, standing behind the table stacked with loaves, and pretend to inspect the bread crusts. No one notices. They're too busy laughing, calling out prices, jostling through the crowd. You reach into your apron pocket and feel for the spare cloth you packed that morning. just in case. You always bring one now, whenever you're more than a few paces from home. Experience teaches you to plan ahead, even when you wish you didn't have to. Slipping away from the market isn't easy. You make up something about the butter needing fetching, and one of the other girls nods without really listening. You duck around the stalls, past a pair of boys tossing pebbles past the goat pen, and finally into the tree line just behind the blacksmith's shed. There's a hollow there, just a dip in the land hidden by brambles and saplings. You've used it before. Not a proper latrine, but it will do. You hike up your shift, checking the cloth. Already soaked. Too fast this time. You wipe with dried moss from your pouch, then fold the clean cloth and press it into place. You do all this quickly, expertly, like you've rehearsed it 100 times. Because you have. The pain hits just as you stand back up sharp, a twisting jab low in your gut. You hold still. Wait. Breathe. It passes. Then you smooth your skirts, tie your apron again, and step back into the sun as though nothing happened. The fair is still roaring. Children running with painted faces. Traders calling prices. A juggler tossing apples and nearly missing a goose. You take your place behind the bread again, smiling faintly. The cloth is warm but steady. You'll be fine. For a while at least. It always becomes a game of how long you can make it. How long until you have to change again. How long before the cramps demand a rest. How long before you feel dizzy from it all, the standing, the blood loss, the pretending. You've learned to stretch it. To ration your energy the way others ration flour in lean seasons. No one teaches you how to do this. It's not written in any book. It's passed down in glances and quiet gestures in the silence between women, as one sits a little too still, and the other offers a seat without asking why. By midday, the pain has become a background hum. Not sharp anymore, just dull and constant. You can work through that. You hand out loaves, offer samples, nod when someone says your baking smells like home. You're polite, present. Even when the cloth shifts slightly with every step tugging at sore skin. You've come to accept that this is your normal. No one claps for you. No one gives you a medal. But still you show up. Still you carry out your duties. Still you make it through another market day with a bloodied rag between your legs and a smile on your face. When you finally return home that night, you collapse onto your stool by the hearth. The fire has gone low. Your mother is already asleep. You peel away your layers, slowly wincing, as the dried blood tugs at tender places. The cloth is heavy, dark, and you feel hollow again, like something inside you was scooped out. You clean yourself at the basin, using the last bit of warm water, and lay the stained cloth into the pot to soak. You'll boil it tomorrow, maybe twice. You sit for a while afterward, just watching the steam curl upward, breathing it in like medicine. Sometimes the pain isn't the worst part. Sometimes it's the effort of pretending everything is fine. You remember being younger, wondering if the bleeding would ever get easier. If your body would one day stop reacting like it was being punished. It hasn't. Not really. You've just learned how to manage it better. To schedule around it, to work through it, to suffer with grace because that's what's expected of you, even when it nearly knocks you over. There was one time a few winters ago you passed out while carrying firewood. The bleeding had been heavy for days, and you hadn't eaten enough. You dropped to your knees in the snow and everything went white. When you woke, your sister was crying, thinking you'd died. You mumbled something about slipping and no one asked further. But you knew, and it scared you. Now you make sure to eat, even when the cramps twist your stomach into knots. You sip warm broth. You keep dried herbs near your bed. You rest when you cannot, because anyone tells you to, but because you've learned what happens when you don't. The blood takes and takes and takes, but you are still here. And so you fold the cloth again. You lay out a clean one for the morning. You tuck it under your pillow just in case. You lie on your side, curled inward, a hand on your belly. The fire hums beside you. Outside, the fair has quieted. A few drunken songs drift through the darkness, but even that fades eventually. You close your eyes, and tomorrow you'll wake up, still bleeding, still aching, still surviving. Because that's what you do, that's what you've always done. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to bleed and be still. To lie in a soft bed with no chores, no footsteps overhead, no baby crying in the crook of your elbow, no bread to knead before first light. To simply lie there, clean linens under you, a cup of warm broth nearby, the fire crackling low, not because you're ill or dying, but just because you're bleeding. Just because your body is asking for rest and anyone is listening. But here, bleeding isn't a reason to stop. It's barely a reason to speak. So you don't. You carry on. Because life here is heavy and constant, and your pain, regular and predictable, doesn't measure against a broken leg or a birth gone wrong or a sick child coughing blood. It doesn't warrant attention. You don't expect it to. And so the blood becomes part of the background noise of your life. Like the wind rattling the shutters or the dog barking at shadows. That morning you wake with your shift stuck to your thighs again. It's early, still too early for the others to be stirring. You pull yourself up slowly, mindful of the ache that's already bloomed across your hips and lower back. You don't have the strength to groan. You just move like always. You carry your stained shift to the wash basin, scrubbing with cold water that makes your fingers stiff. You try not to shiver too loudly. Try not to wake your little brother sleeping nearby. The cloth is darker than usual, almost black where it's soaked through. You chew the inside of your cheek. It's the third day. It's not unusual. But still, a flicker of worry, an old quiet fear starts to rise. You've been lucky so far. You've heard of women who bled too much and didn't stop. Or stopped for too long, and then bled all at once until their faces went gray, and their voices slurred like melting snow. The village has no proper doctor, no leeches or surgical tools, no herbalist trained in anything more complex than easing births or dulling pain. The midwife does what she can, but she's seen too much loss to pretend it's rare. So you do your best not to bleed too much, as if you have any control. By midday, the cramps are deep and pulling. You feel them in your thighs now, a constant hum in your muscles. You sit as much as you can, needlework in hand, pretending to be focused while your vision swims slightly at the edges. You've learned to breathe through it. In through your nose, slow and steady, out through your mouth. Your mother taught you that when you were little, before she even explained what the pain was. Breathe like you're holding the weight of something invisible, she'd said while kneading dough. Like you're trying to stretch it out until it passes. You do that now. Hold the weight of your own blood in your belly. Stretch the silence around it. You're making repairs to the hem of your cloak, when your sister leans in and quietly lays a flat stone at your side, one she's just warmed by the fire. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't have to. You place it gently against your stomach, pressing the heat into the cramp. Later, when your husband comes home with mud on his boots and a duck over his shoulder, he doesn't notice how pale you are. He doesn't ask why you're not helping to pluck the feathers. He just grunts a hello and sits down hungry. You feed him. You sit across from him with your hands in your lap, and the stone still warm beneath your shift. He never asks. You're grateful for that, and also not. Because sometimes you wish someone would see it, say something, acknowledge the work your body is doing even as you do everything else. But that's a luxury you don't get to have. The bleeding lasts longer this time. 5 days, then 6. By the 7th it's light, but still there. You wake each morning hoping for clean cloth, for an end to the constant washing, the soreness, the fatigue. But it lingers like an unwelcome guest, too polite to evict. On the 8th day, it's gone. And the silence in your body feels strange, hollow, almost too still. Like you've been holding your breath for days and suddenly don't know what to do with the quiet. You know it will return. It always does. But for now, you're clean, empty, lighter. You burn the last of the soiled rags in the fire that night. Not because they're ruined, but because you've used them too many times. The seams are thinning. The stains never really faded. You deserve better cloth, you tell yourself, even if no one else says it. You'll cut new pieces from the worn-out apron next week. Carefully, quietly. Fold them and tuck them into your bundle like you always do. But tonight, there's no more blood. Just warmth from the fire. A sore but quiet belly. A sense of returning to yourself. You sip tea made from marjoram and raspberry leaf, an old blend the midwife once taught you for recovery. It tastes bitter, but you drink it anyway. Not for the flavor, but for the reminder that you're allowed to heal. Even if no one claps. Even if no one sees. Your husband is asleep by the hearth, head tipped back, snoring softly. The dog lies curled at your feet. The cottage creaks with wind, but it holds. You rest your hand on your stomach. The skin there is still tender, but it doesn't hurt. Not right now. And that's enough. Because you know that this isn't over. It never is. The blood will return. The pain, the worry, the work, but so will your strength and your resilience and your quiet, unwavering endurance. You've bled and bent and still you've stood. And tomorrow, when the bread must rise again, when the goats must be led out, when the wood must be chopped, you'll be ready. Not because you were healed, but because you're practiced. Because you've learned how to carry this. Every month, every year, and still go on. There's a day in late summer when the air feels thick and still, like the sky itself is holding its breath. The kind of day when everything slows down, not from rest, but from weight. The fields are buzzing with gnats and dry grass. The river's grown low and sluggish, and the animals are restless hooves and tails twitching at things unseen. You can feel it too, beneath your ribs, behind your eyes, low in your spine. And then it starts again. The ache so familiar now, it almost feels like coming home. The twist in your gut. The sudden heat, like your insides are warming just enough to remind you they're yours, but not yours to command. You know better than to wait. You stop what you're doing, sorting dried beans on a blanket near the open door, and head for your corner. Your bundle of cloth is ready folded neatly, each piece worn but clean. You've prepared ahead like always. You've trained yourself to expect it to welcome it, even just so it won't catch you off guard. But no matter how ready you are, it still feels like surrender. You replace the cloth and press your hands against your belly. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. You've learned not to cry. Learned not to clench. Just ride the wave. When you step back into the sun, no one can see the difference. Your face is steady, your stride slow but sure. You sit again, sorting beans, nodding when your cousin babbles about her upcoming betrothal. The smile on your face doesn't falter when she mentions babies, her cheeks going pink as she glances away. You remember being like that, full of nerves and dreams and no idea what's coming. She doesn't know about the bleeding after childbirth, the way it pours out in clots and streaks, as if your body is punishing you for the life it just created. She doesn't know that some women never stop bleeding afterward, never recover, just vanish into silence and closed doors and quick burials. You want to warn her, but you don't. What would you say anyway? Instead, you pass her a better handful of beans and let her dream her dream. She'll learn just like you did. Not through words, through experience. That night the pain deepens. You can't lie flat, it makes the cramping worse. So you curl on your side, your knees tucked up, your hands pressed to the curve of your belly. The stone by the hearth is still warm, so you wrap it in cloth and nestle it close. It helps, but only slightly. You've started whispering things to yourself now, when the pain gets bad, not prayers exactly, just small promises. You'll get through the night. You'll wake up. You'll bake the bread, sweep the floor, gather herbs. You'll bleed, and you'll work, and you'll rest when you can. The words aren't for comfort. They're for continuity. They keep you tethered. And when the morning light slips through the shutter cracks and lands across your face, you sit up slowly, stiff and sore, but still here, still yours. On the second day, the blood is heavier. You have to change your cloth before the sun's fully risen. You've begun to wear darker wool under your apron during these days just in case. If the blood leaks through, it won't show so quickly. You stitched a lining into the back of your skirt for the same reason. It's not enough. It never really is. But it helps. Sometimes you wonder if the other women do the same. If they've all modified their clothes like you have. If they carry clean rags tied into their belts disguised as bundles of herbs or sewing scraps. If they've all had moments where they've bled in church or at a feast, or during a birth they were meant to assist and said nothing. You suspect they have. There's a particular kind of wisdom that lives in the silence between women. You've come to rely on it more than anything else. More than books. More than priests. More than whatever men think they know about your body. It's the knowing glance passed over kneading dough, the discreet handing off of a cloth when someone walks too carefully, the mutual pause when two women catch each other shifting their weight and realize they're both enduring the same invisible war. You don't need to explain the pain anymore, not to them. It's men who fear the blood the most, not just the priests, all of them. Your husband avoids you during your time, won't touch you, barely looks at you. He doesn't say it's because you're unclean. He doesn't say anything. But you know, he goes to sleep early on those nights, turns his back. You used to be angry about it. Now you don't mind the space. Sometimes on those nights you sit by the fire long after he's asleep and let your hand rest on your belly, feeling the heat of the stone, the weight of your own endurance, And you think this blood, this pain, this ritual of quiet survival, it is not a flaw, it's not a punishment. It's the center of things. No crops grow without the cycle. No babies are born without the shedding. No world turns without the quiet power of women who bleed and still wake up early and still cook and still clean and still soothe the children and still mend the tears and still laugh when they can. It's not weakness. It's foundation. You are part of that. One thread in a long, unbroken line, and you carry it forward, not because you must, but because you do. So you wash the cloth again. You hang it carefully away from the smoke. You press your palm to your side and count your breaths, and you go on. You feel it before it arrives, the shift inside you. Not just the ache, but something more subtle. A kind of weariness that clings to your bones like your body's giving you notice. You sit by the fire with your hands in your lap, watching the flames flutter, and you know without looking at the moon that it's time again. That your blood will return before the sun rises. That your cloths freshly washed, folded, and tucked into their usual spot will be needed by morning. There's no drama to it. No surprise. Just the steady truth of your body's pattern. Still, you steel yourself. You've lived long enough with the pain to know it well, but that doesn't mean it's easier. It's simply familiar. Like an old visitor who doesn't knock, just comes in, sits down, and waits for you to rearrange everything around her. You excuse yourself after supper and walk out to the back edge of the cottage where the air smells of damp hay and smoke. The stars are out clear and sharp in the sky. You crouch to relieve yourself near the hedge, and there it is, just a drop at first. But that's enough. You nod to yourself, not in surprise, but in acknowledgement. You stand, pull your skirt back into place, and go inside to light the small hearth pot, where you'll soak the cloths later. When you lie down, you're careful. You've learned to sleep curled around the pane, to angle your hips just so, to place the cloth where it will hold, and to rest lightly, half awake, always half waiting. Morning comes gray and slow. The fire's burned low. The blood has arrived in full. Your shift is damp. Your thighs stick together with a smear of dried red. You change your cloth before even leaving your bed, wrapping the soiled one inside itself and setting it aside with practiced ease. The pain isn't sharp yet, just pressure, but it will grow. It always does. Outside life goes on. There's laundry to scrub, chickens to feed, broth to stir. You do it all quietly, your feet dragging a little more than usual, your hands slower on the scrub board. No one says anything. No one asks. You know your sisters see it. Your mother does too. But none of them speak. It's not cruelty. It's custom. Everyone here has bled or will. No one wants to draw attention to what they know must be endured in silence. You sit by the river to wash the cloth at mid-morning, keeping your hands in the cold water longer than necessary. The river runs shallow and wide this time of year, and the silt clouds up around your fingers as you knead the linen against the stones. You watch the blood fan out in the current, a ribbon of red fading into nothing. You used to think the blood made you unclean. Now you think it makes you real, not holy, not cursed, just alive. The village boys call women like you moody when you bleed, witchy, dangerous. The men laugh it off. But the older women, those who've bled longer than you've been alive, they don't laugh. They just raise their eyebrows and carry on. There's a strength in them you've always admired, a kind of rootedness, as if the years of bleeding and bearing and aching have made them less delicate and more elemental. Less like porcelain, more like stone. You wonder if you'll become like that. You hope so. Later that day, as you chop vegetables at the wooden table, the pain catches you off guard. A bolt of it sharp and deep, like someone reached into your womb and twisted. You set down your knife carefully and grip the edge of the table, counting your breaths. Your sister sees. She pretends not to. Then she nudges the stool closer to you and asks if she can finish the chopping. You sit grateful. That's how kindness works here, quiet, indirect, without thanks or ceremony. In the evening, the midwife comes by to check on your neighbor's baby. She pauses in your doorway, sniffing the air with her sharp nose. "Pain's bad this month, isn't it?" she says without turning her head. You nod. She tosses you a bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. Steep it with honey. Sip slow. Rest when you can. You say thank you. She doesn't answer, already walking away. The tea is bitter, almost metallic, but you drink it. Not because it fixes anything, but because it reminds you that someone else sees you, that you're not bleeding in the dark. That night, you soak your cloths in warm water and sit beside the pot, stirring them gently with a wooden stick. You remember a girl once, years ago, who tried to hide her blood-stained shift in the woods because she was too ashamed to wash it at home. The dogs found it, dragged it back. The village knew within hours. She was gone by the next week. You've never forgotten that. Not because you were close to her, but because it taught you a lesson that stayed with you ever since. Hiding doesn't make the bleeding stop. It only makes it dangerous. You don't hide anymore. You don't announce it either. You just exist with it. Live through it. Carry it. Some nights when the pain is too much to sleep, you think about the women who came before you, the ones whose names are lost, but whose rags were burned in the same fire, who knelt at the same river, who whispered the same curses to the same moon. You imagine them standing behind you shoulder to shoulder, all holding their bellies, all strong in their silence. You imagine them watching you now and nodding, not out of pride, but recognition, and somehow that helps. You're older now, not old exactly, but older than the girls who braid their hair with ribbon and giggle when the boys walk by. You move differently now, steadier, slower. You don't startle at the first tug of pain each month. You know its rhythm. You greet it like a familiar ache, like the turning of the season or the tolling of the church bell. You've bled so many times now that the cloths feel like part of your wardrobe, like a second skin you wear for a few days each moon. You don't hate the bleeding anymore, but you don't romanticize it either. It's just something you do, like drawing water or grinding barley or breathing. You still keep your cloths tucked in the same bundle wrapped in twine and set under the cot. You still boil them. When the bleeding ends, hang them discreetly behind the hearth. Check them for tears and thinning edges. You've replaced the oldest ones with bits of softened linen from an old chemise cut, carefully hemmed with patience, folded with care. No one thanks you for it. No one notices. But it matters somehow. A small act of care for a body that has carried so much. You still get cramps, though, not as sharp. They arrive more like echoes now. Less a scream, more a murmur. You carry them easily, pressing a warmed brick to your belly, or sipping tea brewed from wild raspberry leaves. You've passed that recipe on to younger women, just as it was once given to you. You see them now, two young girls just beginning. They walk with a certain tension in their shoulders, hand brushing their aprons often, as if checking for leaks, for stains, for judgment. You remember that feeling. You remember how lonely it was. So you say small things when you can. You'll get used to it. Keep a spare cloth on you. Hot stones help. So does walking. So does resting. You're not weak. Sometimes they believe you. Sometimes they don't. But that's all right. The knowledge settles into them anyway, like rain into dry earth. One of the girls asked you recently very softly if the bleeding ever stops. You nodded. Eventually. She looked relieved, then terrified. You didn't say more. There's a time for that later. She'll learn that the end of bleeding is its own kind of beginning. A different body, a different rhythm, a different sort of quiet. But for now, she just needed to know it won't be forever. You sometimes wonder when your last bleed will come. You've noticed the space between cycles growing longer. A few days at first, then a week. Now sometimes nearly 2. It unsettles you even though you knew this would happen. Your body feels heavier some days and strangely hollow on others. When the bleeding does return, it's thinner, brighter, more sudden. But it still comes. And each time you welcome it, not with joy or dread, but with reverence. You do all the same things, tie the cloth in place, adjust your skirt, take deeper breaths. You don't rush. You know it will pass. You just move through it like you always have. Like the thousands of women before you. Like the ones beside you now. One day soon, the blood will stop for good. You know this. And you wonder who you'll be then. Not a maiden. Not quite a mother anymore either. Something else. A new role, older, quieter, but no less necessary. You've watched the elders claim that space with dignity and presence. You think maybe you're ready for that too. Still, for now, you bleed. Not every moon, not for as long, but still it comes. And when it does, you don't complain. You boil the rags. You light the fire. You wrap the stone. You drink the tea. You sit a little longer. You move a little slower. And then you rise. Because your life never stopped for the blood, and it won't start once it ends. It has always been both. Labor and blood. Grief and endurance. Pain and presence. You once thought being a woman in this world meant being silent. And in some ways that's still true. But now you understand that the silence isn't absence. It's depth. Every cloth you washed. Every ache you endured. Every moment you held your pain without asking for permission, that was a story. A hymn. A legacy. And now you carry all of it. And pass it on. Because your blood has never been just yours. The fire burns low now, just a soft orange glow at the edge of your vision. The village is quiet. The shutters are closed, the night sounds hushed. You've washed your cloth and folded it, placed it back in its bundle. Your body is sore but steady. You're clean again. Empty for now. You lie back on the cot, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke and lavender. Your belly is still tender. You place a hand there, palm flat, feeling the warmth of your own skin. Your breath slows, in and out, in and out. The aches have dulled. The day has ended. The cycle is moving again. You think of all the women who came before you, each one sitting by her fire, folding her cloth, tending to her aching belly in silence. You think of the girls who will come next, and how one day they'll remember you in the same quiet way. The wind nudges the walls gently, like the breath of the earth exhaling. You close your eyes and let the stillness settle. You've done everything you needed to do. There's nothing left to carry. Not tonight. Just the hush. Just the warmth. Just the rest you've earned. Sleep finds you the way the blood does, softly, without asking.